have you ever grappled with a core belief, something really foundational, and then suddenly realized, wait, maybe I've understood this differently, or maybe even completely wrong?
Oh, yeah. It can be pretty unsettling, right? When those bedrock assumptions get shaken up.
Exactly. And that's kind of where we're heading today. We're doing a deep dive into Abraham's faith story, looking really closely at Romans chapter 4, specifically verses 9 to 17.
Right.
And our goal, our mission, if you like, is to unpack this really, really pivotal idea that righteousness, being right with God, it comes through faith. Not rituals, not rules, not even your family tree.
Which, you have to imagine, was a massively challenging idea back then. Deeply held traditions were involved, and it still has huge implications for us.
For sure. We've pulled together insights from a few different perspectives on this passage, trying to connect the dots.
Okay, so let's set the scene a bit. To really feel the weight of what Paul is saying here, imagine you're a first-century Jewish person. You deeply revere Abraham. He's the father, the founder. And circumcision, that's the sign, God's covenant sign. Undeniable.
Right. It's central to their identity. Then Paul comes along in Romans 4, verses 9 and 10, and basically says, hold on. Abraham was counted righteous by his faith before he was circumcised.
Get that timing. Before. That's not just a footnote. That changes everything.
It completely reframes it.
For centuries, maybe, their understanding of belonging, of favor with God, was tied up in that physical act. Paul isn't just tweaking a belief. He's saying the path itself is different.
And when we say righteousness, we mean being declared right in God's eyes. Yeah, having that proper standing.
Precisely. Being justified, declared just. So the ritual, the circumcision, it wasn't the way to get that standing.
Which must have sounded radical.
Totally. Paul explains it in verse 11. Circumcision was given as a seal, like a stamp of approval on the righteousness Abraham already had because of his faith.
Ah, like a seal on a letter doesn't write the letter, it just confirms who sent it.
Exactly that. It authenticated the reality that was already there through faith. It didn't create the reality. That's a huge distinction.
Huge. Especially for anyone thinking the act itself gave them status.
Yeah.
Wow. How do you think people even process that? Having such a core belief reframed.
I mean, you can imagine the arguments, the confusion, maybe even anger. But Paul doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
This idea that righteousness came before the sign, it has massive ripple effects.
Right, because it changes who's included.
It absolutely does. Because Abraham got this righteousness by faith before the sign, Paul argues he becomes the father of all who believe. Doesn't matter if they're circumcised or not.
So suddenly the family opens way up. It's
Right.
not just about physical lineage anymore.
It includes anyone who shares that same kind of faith. It's universal. This promise to Abraham, that he'd be heir of the world. Immense promise.
Yeah.
Paul says in verse 13, that came through the righteousness of faith, not through keeping the law.
Okay, wait, so the law doesn't bring the promise?
Actually, Paul says the law, in a way, brings wrath. Not because the law is bad, but because, well, we can't keep it perfectly.
Right. It shows us where we fall short.
It exposes sin, and sin brings consequences, brings wrath. But faith, on the other hand, ensures the whole promise rests purely on God's grace. It depends on God, not us.
Which guarantees it for everyone who shares Abraham's faith, whether they follow the specific Jewish law or not. That's verse 16, right?
That's verse 16. It really highlights how big God's plan is. It's not exclusive.
And gosh, this feels so relevant now. Our sources point out how much we live in a world obsessed with labels.
Right,
Souls.
absolutely. Where'd you go to school? What's your job? How involved are you at church? How spiritual do you look? All these external markers.
We're always looking for that seal in our own way, maybe.
And that's the connection, isn't it? This ancient message cuts right through that. It says, look, it's not your background, not the rituals you perform perfectly, not your spiritual resume.
It's faith.
It's faith. It's presented almost as like the great equalizer. It just tears down those walls of pride, comparison, all that stuff.
It challenges us to stop looking at our own spiritual performance, our habits, our group identity as the thing that makes us okay.
Yeah, so the question comes back to you listening right now. Are you ever, maybe subtly, clinging to your spiritual habits, your good deeds, your performance as proof of your worth instead of just resting in grace?
It's a tough question because sometimes our personal beliefs or maybe our cultural norms, they clash with this deeper truth.
Yeah.
Paul's point seems to be God's word has to be the final authority there.
It's a call back to basics, back to grace, back to humility.
So wrapping up here, we've really seen how looking closely at Abraham's story through Paul's eyes in Romans 4, it just completely redefines where righteousness comes from.
Yeah, it shifts it dramatically, away from external things, rituals, lineage, performance.
And roots it firmly in internal faith. in God's incredible, boundless grace.
So here's something to maybe chew on after this deep dive. Since God's promise is received by faith alone, not by rituals, not by rules, not by heritage, what labels, what achievements, maybe even spiritual ones, might you need to reevaluate in your own life?
And following on from that, how could really grasping this idea that God's love isn't tied to any specific group or background, how could that maybe help you embrace a bit more humility and maybe extend more grace to others, knowing we all stand on that same level ground of faith before Him?
Good questions to ponder. Definitely food for thought.